Hello and welcome to the demo to Imperial Grace, which is a kind of a visual novel that we will just get right into. This game is intended for a mature audience. It contains many themes that could offend the sensitivity of younger players. The complete list of trigger warnings is available in our store page. You are going to play a demo version of the game, thus the content might be subject to change and some features are missing, like the diplomacy. Sure, I guess. Click anywhere on the screen to progress in the story. Yeah, use your mouse wheel to go back even after a choice, okay. You can fasten the text display in settings, way ahead of you, colorblind mode to fonts, click on the chest in the right up corner to see your available resources, okay. Normal mode, you'll need to manage your resources wisely, or story mode, you'll have infinite resources. Well, we'll do normal mode. We are also female, there is no choice here. It is story relevant, I suppose. I don't know what these specialties do. It's also not... Oops. I clicked on the right mouse button and apparently it's taking me to save. Warpath, you'll gain army and combat bonuses. Basan will be your tutelary god. Okay, I need to double click it for some reason. Stewardship path, you'll gain economy and mathematics bonuses and myriad. No, this one only, whatever. Diplomatic, you'll gain diplomatic and poison bonus. Well, the game just told us that there is no diplomacy in the demo, so I would be stupid to take that one. And the faith path, religion and faith, we'll take the stewardship path. Then hairstyle. This skin color, sure. Left, wait, I can choose different eye colors. They're all fairly bland. We'll go with that, I think. Bland in the sense that there's no like colors that people don't really have, like red eyes or stuff like that. It's just your basic colors. I'd like orange, which there isn't, but, well, there we go. Your Highness, Your Highness! A panicked voice resonated in my dream like an echo, a few moments before I understood that it came from somewhere else and woke up with a jolt, disoriented. The palpable feeling of urgency had immediately brought me to my senses, but it still took me a few seconds to recognize the advisor's voice as well as the room I was in. Alden, what's going on? Your Highness, I bring terrible news. Your father was assassinated last night. I was ready to hear just about anything. Managing crisis was an important part of royalty after all, and yet I was completely stunned by the news. My father was dead, at the hands of an assassin, just a few rooms away from me. All the implications from this revelation bounced through my head, drenched in doubt and fear concerning my own security and the future of the realm of Calamity. I beg your pardon, Your Highness. I did everything I could to save him, but I was too late. Pulling myself out of my lethargy, I looked down on Alexander, who knelt next to the bed. His head bent low, as if the weight of his shame stopped him from getting up. Whatever went down, I knew he had nothing to be ashamed of. When I was just a child, I already admired his talents, and they grew steadfast with age and the position of general. His presence here was a relief. I didn't know the assassin's full intentions, but even if they were after me, as long as Alexander was by my side, I didn't have anything to worry about. It didn't help your father now, did it? Don't put yourself down like this. You aren't responsible for what happened. We'll bring the regicide to justice. Still mortified, Alexander stayed on his knees but nodded in approval, convinced by the strength in my voice. As for me, now that I said it out loud, I felt that the information had settled in my mind, and I finally accepted it as truth, with a full understanding of the situation. My father, Magnus V, Emperor of Calamity, was dead. Many would have broken down after hearing such news, but for years now, I hadn't held an ounce of affection for him. His death was actually good news to me. It marked the beginning of a new era, that I oh so desired since I had learned where my destiny lay. I was to succeed him. I was to become the Empress. But it wasn't yet time for celebration. Although I was the legitimate heir to the throne, I had plenty of detractors, and I still needed to figure out why the assassination had taken place. I had many questions about the killer's identity and motivations. I was lost in thought, and it took me a while to realize that Alden and Alexander were staring at me, worried, surely awaiting a reaction or a declaration from me. Both had known me since my early childhood. They knew the enmity I felt for the Emperor, and I trusted them enough to set all pretenses aside. But it was perhaps a bit inappropriate to rejoice over my future title while my father's dead corpse was still warm. After taking a deep breath, I threw off my covers and got up, eyeing them. I don't know what exalt means. We'll stay neutral. Gloating seemed a tad indecent, but I could at least spare myself the pretense of being the grieving orphan that I would surely need to be in front of the court. What I feel isn't important. You don't have to worry about me. What matters most is our nation, and we all know that the sudden death of an emperor is a delicate situation. At the moment, the most important thing is to preserve the kingdom's stability. I'm counting on you to protect and serve me. This won't be an easy task, but I'm sure we can accomplish great things. This time Alexander got up, putting his hand on his sheath in a dignified and military posture. At your service, Highness. May the four witness my oath. I solemnly swear that I will protect you until my dying breath. Emphatic, he bowed down before lifting his eyes up to me. I smiled and accepted his allegiance with a certain poise, despite my unkempt hair and my nightgown. Marjorie, my tutor, often told me that everything about me showed nobility. I didn't need any props to act like an empress. Today, I understood what she had meant. Alden, however, didn't seem to share the general's fervor. Forgive me, your majesty, for tarnishing your enthusiasm, but there is a very delicate question that I have to ask. Have you had your father killed? His abrupt question threw me off, and I stared at him, wavering between surprise and indignation. How dare you even suggest such a possibility? You're going too far, advisor. Come on, don't be offended. You said it yourself. You've hated your father since the death of your brother. You've always held him responsible for it. And your father dies on the very day of your return to the palace? Whatever your answer is, I'll accept it, but I need to know. I felt anger rise within me at these words, and I walked to the window to breathe some fresh air. After I took a few deep inhales, I finally turned around to face him, and gave him my answer in a firm voice. On the one hand, my presence here isn't a coincidence. The Emperor celebrates, or rather was about to celebrate, his birthday in 2 days. Half of the Empire's noblemen are here. It's undeniable that the event presented the perfect opportunity to strike. The palace is swarming with unknown guards and servants. It's much harder to provide security in these circumstances. Exactly. On the other hand, your suspicions are an insult to my intelligence, advisor. After a regicide, the heir is always suspected. If I'd really wanted to speed up fate, you better believe I would have been smarter about it. Marjorie taught me the rules of the game. I would never risk losing everything in such a foolish way. I know my ascension to the throne will already be difficult because I'm a woman. I'll state it plainly if it can relieve your doubts, but listen closely because I will not repeat myself. No, I did not have my father assassinated. My eyes trained on him, I crossed my arms, almost daring him to contradict me as I kept a lid on my fury. Alden seemed to gauge me for a moment, then nodded in assent and apology. Please forgive me, Your Grace. At nightfall, I'll alert the Master of Murmurs, and we'll launch an investigation to uncover the truth and bring justice to your father. I would have preferred more vivid regrets, but under the circumstances this was enough, and I felt my anger slowly fade away. I accept your apology. Let's not speak of this again. There are more urgent things to do. The news will no doubt make quite a commotion. You've asked us to swear allegiance to you. I assume you will try to claim your rightful place as heir, Your Grace. Sure. I nodded vigorously and didn't skip a beat before answering. Yes, my father doesn't have a direct heir. I doubt the court will accept his bastards, and he hasn't remarried since my brother's death. I've been preparing for this role for a long time. The day simply came earlier than I had planned. There are many things I didn't agree with when my father ruled. Only time will tell, but I think I'll be a good empress. I don't doubt that, Your Grace. In fact, I'm rather relieved to see you have already thought about it. Like you said, our country needs stability. We can't get away with a weak-willed monarch on the throne. I'm sure you'll be a wonderful empress, Lydia. His words were barely a whisper, but I was sure of what I had heard, and I felt my cheeks redden a little. He seemed embarrassed by his own boldness and blushed more violently than me, while I flashed him a smile to reassure him. It had been years since I had last heard him call me by my name. Even if I had no doubts about my own abilities, it was always refreshing to see the trust he gave me. I cleared my throat and regained my composure so I could give my orders. This would be a long night. Who else knows about the assassination for now? Alexander seemed surprised by my question and frowned a bit while searching his mind. When I found the body, I immediately went to warn the advisor, and both of us rushed to see you. The only ones who know about it are the guards who were patrolling with me and your father's personal maid who was passing by. We knew it would be bad to attract attention, so I had her discreetly sent to the dungeon for interrogation. How about the guards who were stationed before my father's door? Both are dead. I also had their corpses taken to the dungeon for examination. I paced the room, lost deep in thought. You've done well. Now we have to keep it all a secret. It's imperative that no one else hears about it. Your Majesty, this won't be an easy secret to keep. Obviously, we won't be able to do that forever. I only need a few days so I can stay ahead of my detractors. Alden looked thoughtful for a few moments, then he nodded. I see. So you want to act before everyone else, which should give you the upper hand. Exactly. Very smart. I have no doubt that some people will want to take advantage of the situation, like her, especially since you're a woman, which surely won't be to everyone's taste. Even if you are unquestionably the rightful heir, your place will be fought over. But if you don't give them time to react, that could make things a great deal easier. That's what I was thinking too. I'd love it if the situation was more straightforward, but this is a little white lie, and the alternative is the chaos of a wildly disputed succession. Alden nodded, and I continued, developing the rest of my plan. In the meantime, pretend that His Majesty is not feeling well and investigate discreetly. I see. I'll order my men to stay silent. I'll also ensure that they haven't said a word so far. About that, it might be wiser to ensure that they can't talk at all. Low-grade staff is known for its gossiping, even the guards. My men are trustworthy. They would never disobey. Would you be willing to bet on that if it could jeopardize the plans of Empress, to whom you have only just sworn allegiance? And that maid, can you also guarantee she'll keep quiet? His teeth clenched, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. Alexander shook his head. The weight of Alden's words had also fallen heavily on my shoulders, and I observed both men while contemplating my next steps. This decision is yours to make, Your Grace, but I strongly advise you to silence them for good. Alden was right. The most effective way was to ensure someone stayed quiet. Was to have them killed. However, there could be other alternatives to consider. Such a decision couldn't be taken lightly, because whatever I decided, I couldn't afford to regret it. Okay. We can either have them killed, we'll pretend they were collateral damage of the assassin. I'm sorry, Alexander, but we cannot afford to take any risks. Or ensure their loyalty by promising them a much better position once I'm crowned. Even if they were really tempted to talk about what happened, this should be a good enough motivation to ensure their allegiance. Or, when you explain to them that they mustn't say a word, give them a few coins and promise them more once the secret has been revealed. And in the meantime, send them on a vacation far away from here. That should be enough to guarantee their silence. I don't actually think it would. I also do not want to kill them, so that is our only option. that I think is, well, that is the most failsafe, but that seems the most reasonable. I saw Alexander sigh in relief and imperceptibly loosen up. Alden, however, shrugged and bowed to me. That could work, yes. Time will tell. I have faith. Besides, if I am right, I'll be surrounded by trustworthy people, which is always useful. I had spoken with determination, perfectly hiding my own doubts. Humans are unpredictable in nature. It was a bet, and I could only hope it would pay off. In any case, even if the servants talked and the rumor escaped, I still had my chances. The advantage I was building would be precious to me, but it wasn't the only weapon in my arsenal. Can I count on you, Alexander? He straightened into a military stance and immediately bowed. Of course, Your Grace. I will do my best to convince them. You've made the right decision. Without further ado, he bowed once more and left the room with a heavy step. Alden seemed to be lost in thought for a moment, giving me time to come to my senses before he bowed down in turn. I must at least inform the Master of Murmurs of the situation so that we may launch an investigation. I nodded, aware of our lead spy's discretion as well as his efficiency. Once that is done, I'll come to you to plan the rest of your ascent. Once more I nodded in approval, glad to be offered a little interlude that would allow me to gather my thoughts. And to dress decently while I was at it. After all, even if the coronation hadn't taken place yet, deep within me I knew it. I felt it. I was the Empress. Chapter 1. The Crown. After learning of her father's death, Lydia, supported by her advisors, decides to hide the Emperor's assassination by ensuring the loyalty of the few servants aware of the events. She hopes that this reprieve will allow her to set the stage in secret so she can obtain the political support necessary to her coronation. Spring, Day 8, morning. The sun had now been up for a few hours, promising a beautiful day, but I knew I wouldn't be able to appreciate it. Now that the rush of adrenaline from the news had passed, all I had left were doubts of the day to come, which were going to be exhilarating as much as terrifying. I was gambling my future along with Calidia's, and that was a big deal. I had spent the past few hours readying myself and refining the details of my plan, to appease my latent nervousness as best I could, but that didn't help me shake off my main preoccupation, the servants. Like Alden had said, I had made a risky decision, and I had been torturing myself for hours wondering if it was worth it. I was tossing and turning, when I heard a knock at the door. I leapt out of my bed and let Alden in. There, Your Grace, we have followed your orders. I hadn't seen that he was accompanied by the Master of Murmurs, who came in after him. A slight discomfort washed over me. His role inside the palace was vital, but since I was a child I had been terrified of his hidden face and the mysterious aura that surrounded him. Nevertheless, my discomfort turned into amazement when I saw him remove his hood as if it were nothing and turn to face me. My brain had pictured the worst for years, and it was very unsettling to finally be able to put a face to that man. I realized he wasn't as monstrous as I had imagined. In fact, I was so shocked that it made me forget the reason for my visitor's presence, which seemed to greatly amuse the Master of Murmurs. Is there a problem, Your Grace? Oh, it's just I didn't know that you could show your face. To be honest, I do what I want, but in principle I only remove my hood in the presence of my sovereign and their close collaborators. Though I like to entertain the mystery and anonymity that come with the job, it would be far too dangerous for me never to reveal my face. Some people might use that to usurp my identity. I see. Though it was disconcerting, it was also rather reassuring to see that a man as important as the Master of Murmurs already acknowledged me as his sovereign. Alden cleared his throat to recall me to my duty, and I suddenly remembered the reason for the two men's presence, which immediately made my anxiety flare up. To keep myself from staring at the master spy, I faced the advisor and fully focused on him. Did everything go well? My anxiety must have been conspicuous, even if I was doing my best to put on a confident expression. The servants seem convinced by your offer. They left the palace without complaining, so I suppose we can count that as a win. Despite all that, it's still a bit early to be sure of anything. I gave the Master of Murmurs and Alexander the task of keeping a close eye on the situation. The Master of Murmurs slowly nodded in assent. We'll know more tomorrow, but for the time being there is nothing more to report. I lifted my eyes to meet my advisors and flashed Alden a reassuring smile. Clearly he read my emotions better than I'd thought, and I couldn't allow myself to visibly waver at such a critical time. I know that, and what's done is done. Now we must focus on the future. Bring the High Priest to the council room. I need him to contact the Quadrator. Robert is a pious man. Are you sure it's a good idea to confide in him? Everyone likes to think the devout never lie, but one doesn't obtain a place like his without cheating a little. I admit that the idea of lying to him came to me for a fleeting moment, but to fool him would be a complex task, and I'll be needing his support when the time comes. The people put great stock in men of faith. Very well, Your Majesty. Will that be all? Yes, thank you. Spring, Day 8, afternoon. You summoned me, Your Grace. Yes, thank you for coming, Robert. I gestured for him to sit down while I settled behind my father's imposing desk. Like I had predicted, my behavior made him lift a curious brow, but I pretended not to notice it. I won't beat around the bush. My father, the Emperor, died during the night. Clearly, we had done a pretty good job at keeping that a secret since the shock on his face seemed genuine. What? But how? And why am I just learning about it now? I need to pray for his soul. I tried to appease him with a wave of my hand, inviting him to sit back down, since he looked like he was about to get up. He was murdered. For the time being, we're keeping his death a secret so we can investigate without causing any sort of panic. It was the Master of Murmur's idea. He's convinced he'll be able to find the assassin more easily this way. Drowning in information, the High Priest slumped into his chair and took in my half-truths, while I assumed a saddened expression. It truly is a tragic situation. Keeping quiet and hiding my mourning is a very hard task for me. I know it's a lot to ask of you, but you need to keep this a secret. I want to do everything in my power to uncover the murderer, especially since I'm scared he could come after me. Once more, I was quite proud of the quivers in my voice, and my acting seemed to be effective since I saw a spark of compassion light up in his eyes. I understood now why the general was guarding your door like a common soldier. With a closed expression on my face, I nodded, searching for the right words. The first and main reason I've summoned you here is so that I could confide in you and ask you to pray for my departed father's soul. Of course, Your Majesty. I'll lock myself up in the great temple and dedicate myself to the task. My face still sad, I gave him a tight, grateful smile, but inside I felt relieved. His prayers should keep him busy enough that he wouldn't be tempted to reveal everything. Now I could move on to the true reason of his presence here. But before that, this saddens me, but I have another favor to ask of you. Of course, Your Grace. What is it? Well, Alden and I are afraid that all the upstarts across the kingdom will rush to the castle and try to usurp the throne as soon as my father's death is made public. In their greed, many forget that my line sits on a throne by the grace of the Four, so I'd like to send a letter to the Quadrator and have him support my coronation as well as reaffirm my legitimacy. Once more, he stayed silent, and I tried to hide my worry behind a veil of sadness. I hated that my plans depended on a single person, but I didn't have a choice. Only kings and high priests could hope to quickly reach the ultimate leader of the cardinals, and I technically wasn't a queen yet. I understand, yes. You are Magnus V's only legitimate child. The throne should be yours. That said, I don't know if the Quadrator will approve of those plans, since you're a woman, and an unwed one at that. I felt my body tense up at his words, and it took all I had to conceal how irritated I was by this reminder. I knew I would be told such things. I'd mentally prepared myself for it, but obviously it hadn't been enough. It's an issue, yes, and I will do my best to find a fitting king quickly, but you'll agree that I cannot entrust the throne of Calydia to just anyone. I have plenty of suitors, but I need some time to study each and every one of them. That's not something that can be done in just a couple of days or even weeks. In the meantime, we do need someone to lead the country and make sure it doesn't sink into chaos. And if a regent were to be appointed, I'm afraid he might refuse to give the throne back to me and my husband, which would lead the whole country to a bloodbath. No one wants to see another era of murderous plots like during Magnus III's time. You're right, Your Grace. We cannot let such a tragedy befall us. I'll go write a letter to the Quadrator right away to express support for your coronation and explain our situation. Satisfied, I let out a sigh of relief. I thank you for your support, High Priest Robert. It means a lot to me. Swiftly, I opened one of the desk's drawers and pulled out a thin, sealed letter. While I was waiting for you, I humbly wrote a few words destined for the Quadrator. We've never met, and I hope this would help him get to know me a little, as well as reassure him of my faith in the Four. I was thinking that perhaps you would be so kind as to add it to your own correspondence. Once more he seemed to be caught off guard, but he smiled instantly and enthusiastically. Of course, Your Majesty, it's a great idea. Relieved, I gave him the letter in question, while thanking him once more for his support and his help in these unprecedented times. I only hoped he didn't have the audacity to break the seal, because even if it did contain a few cliches on my virtues, the letter mostly made promises that could actually motivate the Quadrator. By the way, let me quickly check this. Okay, so these are money. 8 is okay. The pink one's influence. That's army, faith, and resources. So, oh, not that. How do I exit this? No, that's also save. Oh, there's an X. So that's right. I can also hover over it. That's money. That's influence. Having always known that I'd need his support, one day I'd used the few resources at my disposal to observe him closely, and I'd learned something that could stain his reputation. Or, I knew that gold made the world go round, and so I promised a hefty donation to the Great Temple of the Four in Meridian. Knowing his taste for luxury, I knew that he wouldn't be insensitive to a few more riches. We'll take that. To play with a man as powerful as the Quadrator, and I wasn't talking about his possible connection to the gods, but his actual worldly power, was a risky move, but it was all worth it. The dice had been cast. I could only hope for things to go well and prepare the field for my conquest of the Callidian nobility. Evening. Despite my desire to act, for the time being, I couldn't do anything but wait for the Quadrator's answer. Even if the letter had left that very morning, Meridian was far away, and I knew I couldn't hope for an answer for at least 3 days. I had to chomp at the bit and act naive. My first thought was to mingle with the court so I could clear my head, but then pretending that nothing was up and feeding rumors to justify my father's absence was more frustrating than doing nothing. Even Marjorie's presence irritated me. Despite her advanced age, as soon as she turned her inquisitive eyes onto me, I had the impression she managed to perceive the truth. And so I had taken refuge in the library, hoping to read a little. But in all honesty, even if I managed to unscramble a few words, my thoughts were far away, and my mind was replaying the events of the previous night, asking myself again and again if I had done the right thing. Your Grace. As if he suddenly realized where we were, the Master of Murmurs repeated his interjection in a lower, albeit just as sealess tone. Your Grace, we have an urgent problem on our hands. This preamble was enough to make me abandon my boring reading, and I put down my book, ensuring there weren't any indiscreet ears in the library before I invited him to continue. After he also made sure no one else was around, he pulled back his hood and resumed his explanations. As you know, I've asked to keep an eye on the 3 people aware of your father's death. However, barely 24 hours have passed, and I've been told that the maid immediately went to a noble, the Baron Torben of Levallois, instead of leaving town. I conducted an investigation, and I'm almost positive the two are in a relationship. I've interrogated her colleagues, who confirmed that she's had a rich benefactor for a few months already, and everything hints at his name. I didn't really care about my servant's romantic endeavors, but I wanted to know where he was going with this. Are you afraid she'll speak? Yes, and I'm afraid the Baron will want to use that information to glean more power. Is he trying to blackmail us? No, we've had nothing of the sort, but tonight he's holding a party to which half of the nobles currently in the capital are invited. That cannot be a coincidence. No event justifies for such a party to be improvised. It's improper. I admit the situation is very odd, but do we have any proof? Unfortunately, no, Majesty, only suspicions. I took in a few deep breaths while I pondered the situation and calculated the risks. If these allegations happen to be true, I would be stuck between a rock and a hard place. Not only would my plan to gain time fail utterly, but everyone would know of my deception. Moreover, if she didn't speak, now that I knew of this maid's allegiance, I wasn't sure it was a good idea to give her a better position down the line. That would give her more opportunities to spy on me for the Baron. What are our options? There aren't many, Majesty. Either we do nothing and wait to see what happens while preparing to counteract possible rumors, or we have them both assassinated to eliminate any risks of leaks. But the Baron is an influential man. There are far fewer chances of his death passing unnoticed than that of a simple servant. Tired, I massaged my temples to help me think about the best course of action in the situation. Death was most definitely the best way to stop someone from talking, but the reason I wanted to avoid such methods in the first place was because they disgusted me, and they could well have unwelcome repercussions for me. Would allying myself with the Baron be a possibility? It's true that this information will give him power, but not as much as having an Empress owe him a favor. I think it could work, but do you really want to start your rule indebted to such an ambitious man? That was indeed the risk. I could always double-cross him once the danger had passed, but that would undeniably have after-effects. Do we have an idea of what he wants? I'd like to know what I'm getting myself into. If I had a few days, I would have been able to tell you, but I can't answer you in time for the party. Sighing once more, I closed my eyes to better contemplate my options. Okay. We could either just accept what would happen and not make things worse, or I despise having to resort to this solution, but because the servant hasn't been trustworthy, I don't have much of a choice. Have them murdered before tonight and make sure this can't be traced back to me, otherwise consequences would be even more disastrous. Or, right now what matters most is to solve this issue. If the Baron demands more than is owed after all is said and done, we'll decide what to do with him. But he might behave reasonably, which would mark the start of a fruitful alliance. We won't know until we try. We at least have to attempt to reason with him. You know what? We'll wait to see what happens. An audacious choice. I must admit I'm a little surprised. I didn't expect you'd be the kind of woman who'd put her fate in the hands of the four. But if that is what you want, so be it. I will inform Alden of your decision. Slowly, I nodded while telling myself that indeed a few praise to Horel wouldn't be a bad idea under the circumstances. Yes, he's the most qualified for this kind of speech. He needs to be prepared to defend us against rumors if your suspicions prove correct. I will let you know once I have more news. I will send a spy there, which should allow us to stay ahead of our detractors by a few hours. Thank you. I'm counting on you. The Master of Murmurs gave me an elegant bow and departed, leaving me alone once more, with doubts gnawing at my mind. I waited for the end of the day with more nervousness than usual, unable to concentrate, fearing the arrival of the Master of Murmurs as much as I hoped for it. Night. It was already late when the Master of Murmurs knocked on my door to inform me of the evolution of the situation. Although it was late at night, I hadn't managed to close my eyes at all, and I awaited the outcome with anxiety, despite the detachment that I'd wanted to display earlier that day. Your Grace, I have good news. When I heard these words, I calmed down, already aware of how this was going to play out. I just got an achievement that was like, hey, you avoided death. Alright, sure. I don't know how many hoops we would have had to jump through to get there, but that's good, I suppose. I calmed down, already aware of how this was going to play out. Clearly our worries were unfounded. Our spy is positive. The Baron threw this party to announce his rushed engagement to Noble from Vargas. I think there is a lot more to it, but nothing that could affect your coronation. Either the servant kept to herself, or the Baron chose not to say a word. We can't be sure of anything at the moment, so I will still keep a close eye on him, but I do believe the four are with you, Majesty. Indeed, the gods must have been with me, since I couldn't have hoped for a better outcome. More than relieved, I tried nonetheless to stay neutral, while dismissing the Master of Murmurs. I thank you for your work. The four may be with me, but believe me when I say I'm relieved to have you on my side as well. My compliments seemed to please him, and he politely bowed before leaving me in peace. The days to come were going to be taxing, but at least I could remove one of the weights that had been pressing on my chest. Spring Day 10. Morning. Your Grace, this is a little premature, but should you become Empress, you will need to manage the kingdom's policies. I'd like to make sure that you're ready for such a task. One can always learn more. Oh, an exception has occurred. While running game code, type error object of type non-type has no len. Okay. It has no length. Full traceback. Okay. Attempts a rollback to a prior time, allowing you to save or choose a different choice. Ignores the exception, allowing you to continue. This often leads to additional errors. Opens the traceback txt file in a text editor. Okay. Now the question is, if it attempts a rollback to a prior time, and that prior time is like the beginning of the game, that would suck. If I ignore it and it completely breaks, that would also suck. It's some kind of notification, I guess, that doesn't display. I think it should be fine to ignore this one, actually. Nope, there's a lot. English script, the tutorial text doesn't work. What if I roll back? Okay, let me just save for now. Save. And then... is it this text, that playthrough the tutorial text that didn't show up? That broke. Okay. I don't know why it broke. I don't know why it works now, but there we go. As you already know, the kingdom's policies influence how your subjects, noble or otherwise, view you, but also what resources will be available to us. You can set tax rates for the people and the nobility. As you may have guessed, the higher they are, the less happy the people will be, but the faster the coffers will fill up. But there are many other things, much more subtle. For example, you can decide how open to trade our borders should be, or which sectors of the economy you'd like to focus on. We must also consider how to protect ourselves from our neighbors, especially bearing in mind Vargas's warlike inclinations, but maintaining an army is very, very expensive. As such, investing in diplomacy may offer better results in the long run. And finally, we have to manage the cardinals. Their influence on the people is immense, and they have infrastructures all over the nation. Offerings made to them are never wasted. We've set up regular periods of time during which we collect earnings, but there will be a short delay before the consequences of any changes you make can be seen. The story alternates with phases of gameplay which are triggered between two scenes. During these phases you will be able, among other things, to modify your kingdom's general policies. Gains will be distributed at the end of the gameplay phase. Is that clearer now? Yes. Yes, even if it's all very theoretical. That is true, but the best way to approach the subject in a more concrete manner is to look into it yourself. Even if I'll only be doing this work after my coronation, may I try my hand at it now? I'm sure there are things that I'd like to change in my father's policies. That sounds most excellent to me. Okay. Our taxes. Currently the taxes are low. The people will understand and you'll receive a moderate amount of money. Oh no, they're moderate. Everything that's kind of like a bit darker is the currently selected amount. That is fine. Offerings. You will help finance a good part of the temples and academies across the realm. That sounds good. Small taxes are levied on products traded between countries. Free trade would cost us money but probably give us more resources. Might be a good idea. Yeah, okay. It gives us +5 nobility as well. Actually costs more resources. Alright. Economy. Your economy will be focused on the exploitation of raw resources. It will focus on craftsmanship, especially luxury items. Or your economy will be focused on agriculture and food production. This gives us 1 money but costs us 5 people. This gives us 5 people. We'll go with that actually for now. What if we do high? It gives -5 people, but it gives us 1 more money. So that is actually purely the better choice. Because if we compare moderate and resources, gives -5 people plus free money plus free resources. High and farming gives 0 people plus free money and plus free resources. So this is just better. Plain and simple, it's better. Army, you'll probably maintain your current army, alright. And diplomacy, you will send at least 1 ambassador to each neighboring country. Would be cordial. Active would cost even more money, but would grant us more influence and +5 nobility. And minimum would remove some nobility from us, and not really do much in terms of influence. I'll actually go with active. We're not making much money, but great nobility, great influence seems good. Confirm. Day 15, morning. Your Highness, Your Highness. Dawn had barely risen when I heard a kerfuffle at the door, and I immediately recognized Robert's voice. I got up with a groan and quickly slipped on a dress, trying to make myself presentable before opening the door. High Priest, what's going on? I tried to remain as neutral as possible, but I was burning up with a mix of anxiety and excitement because I had a solid guess as to what this was about. The letter has arrived. The Curator, he's answered, Your Majesty. Nervous, he handed me 2 letters bearing the recognizable seal of His Holiness. Your name is written on them. I didn't dare open them, Your Highness. Exhilarated, I looked at the 2 pieces of paper that were about to seal my future. One seemed official, while the other was explicitly for my eyes only. I would have liked to be alone when reading them both, but clearly it had taken Robert all he had not to break the wax seal on the official letter, and he now stared at me impatiently. My throat was dry as I grabbed the paper cutter to open the correspondence, and my heart was beating so fast I had the impression everyone in the room could hear it. Lady Lydia of Tarrenfell, daughter of Magnus V of Tarrenfell the Fierce, Emperor of Calydia. The 4 have spoken and have recognized you as the legitimate heir of the crown of Calydia, by virtue of your blood and despite your gender. By this decree I convey the word of the gods. May your governance be respected by all the just and the pious. May your rule prosper and never stray from the 4's faith. Verma, Quadrator by the grace of the 4. I was shaking so hard I felt my legs give in, and I had to sit on my bed so I didn't fall over. I had done everything in my power to make this moment happen, but now that it was upon me, I was engulfed by all the emotions I had accumulated in the past week. Robert seemed to understand me, and he bowed to leave me a few long seconds so I could take in the Quadrator's words. Finally, he spoke up. That's marvelous, Your Majesty. I knew the 4 would acknowledge your legitimacy. Almost timidly, I nodded and tried to recover my usual composure. With the Quadrator's support, my coronation was sure to happen, but that didn't mean I was rid of enemies or other contenders. I couldn't let my guard down yet. Yes, the time has come for everyone to know the truth. Gather the nobles in the castle at dawn and prepare the pigeons. He nodded, a grave expression on his face. Yes, we can't wait any longer. The secret of your father's death couldn't have been kept indefinitely in any case. It was true that his absence had been going on for a while, and a possible illness worried people just as much as a possible death. It was fortunate that these letters hadn't taken too long to arrive. I'll be there. I need to finish getting ready. Of course, Your Majesty. I'll have the bells rung, but at such an early time, I don't suppose we can gather everyone in less than an hour. I approved with a polite nod, and soon I watched him leave and close the door. Finally, on my own, I collapsed on the bed and let myself gloat. I whooped in pure childish joy as I read the Quadrator's letter over and over again. There's another letter that you maybe want to read? No? Okay. I knew that I had plenty of challenges ahead of me, but this was my first victory against traditions, and I intended to savor it for as long as I could. Only after a few long minutes had passed did I decide to open the second letter, which was addressed to me personally. Lady Lydia of Tarrenfell, thank you for your generous donation to Meridian's Great Temple. Please know that I never forget my friends. I'm sure we'll get along marvelously. Happy with my decision, I sighed and carefully put the letter away into my desk. Pretty promises were easy to forget. I could perhaps use the parchment to remind him of his support one day, or to show to some reluctant noble just how popular I was with one of the most powerful men on the continent. In any case, I believed that my actions had managed to sway him, and I was quite proud of that. Now it was the court I had to sway, and I knew this wasn't going to be an easy task. Day 18, afternoon. Make sure not to overexert yourself, Lydia. You're spending your days locked up in this office. You should get out a bit to clear your head. Come take a walk with this old lady. I left the door open, and although I hadn't heard Marjorie come over to me, I wasn't surprised, since her perfume, which she applied too liberally, had filled the room. I almost felt nostalgic for a moment. Even if it made me happy to see her, my presence in my office wasn't guided by fun. I was overwhelmed with invitations, requests, promises. I had spent the past 3 days flattering the Khalidian nobility to ensure that nothing would jeopardize my coronation in 3 weeks' time, and I still had a lot left to do. Oh, perhaps you can fool everyone else, but I know you're far from being an old lady, Marjorie. My reply made her laugh, a hoarse and joyous sound that belied what I had just said. I still have the same quick wit I had when I was 20, but I'm afraid my whining bones disagree with you, sweetheart. Come on, don't be cruel. You already broke my poor heart when you didn't let me in on the secret. I put my quill down with a sigh and closed the inkwell, hoping its content would not dry out. She had taught me many things, and even if I had grown stronger than her in a few areas, it was obvious that she still used guilt like no one else. She almost made me feel bad for hiding my father's death from her. You know full well I didn't have a choice. The information had to be disclosed to as few people as possible. I know, sweetheart, but I would have liked to be there for you. These past few days mustn't have been easy. No, they weren't indeed. As promised, I quietly walked by Marjorie's side through the garden, but we couldn't take one step before some servant or noble offered me their condolences. I'm so tired of pretending to be sad. I know your father was a man of many flaws, but he was your family, your blood. You shouldn't hate him this vividly. It's not healthy, especially now that he's dead. No, that's too easy. You can't just die and expect that all your mistakes will be forgiven. She sighed, and I decided to change the subject before I had to listen to another lecture on the importance of family bonds. But since we're speaking of forgiveness, I need your help. Suspicious, she frowned, although she kept walking calmly between the flower beds. I would like it if you gave me Fear Castle. That old dilapidated fortress? What for? Pretending to admire some insects that were flying around the planters, I hesitated for a second. I needed the fortress to buy the Faram's loyalty, but Marjorie held a deep hatred for them. I didn't like lying to her, but I couldn't run the risk that she'd refuse my request. Keep things vague. You're the one who told me to keep my cards close to my chest. All I can say is that it's a strategic location from the perspective of 3 separate duchies, and that I might need it. Is that how you pronounce that? I don't know. Like you said, it's been left to rot ever since the Faram revolt. It's nothing more than an old pile of rubble on steep and barren land. You won't miss it. She frowned but shrugged. Do as you wish. Having an empress owing you a favor isn't a bad thing after all. Thank you, Marjorie. I knew I could count on you. Relieved, I finally let out the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Knowing the affection Marjorie held for me, I knew that I'd end up convincing her, but as I had a meeting with the Faram heir in 4 days, I didn't have a lot of room for errors. With one less issue weighing on my heart, I continued my walk with a bounce in my step, forgetting for a few minutes the court's problems and plots. But that will be where we're ending this week's Indie Sunday. We've played about 50 minutes now. We've gotten to know some more of the game. I might actually continue playing this in the future. I have quite enjoyed so far. It reminds me of the Life and Death of Sir Bronte in multiple ways. And yeah, we might be seeing this again in the future. But, you know, obviously it's taxing on the voice. So for now, we'll end it here. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys again sometime soon. Bye.